This session is part of the Indie Author Fringe Conference, a 3 times a year author conference fringed to the major publishing fairs London Book Fair, Book Expo America and Frankfurt Book Fair. The Indie Author Fringe is run under the stewardship of the Alliance of Independent Authors, is organised by writers for writers and is free to attend. Let's see who's sharing self-publishing insights in this session.
So what I'd like to do is ask you guys, what points have we not mentioned that you need to know? What kind of thing that we've said might have confused you, might have been the kind of thing you feel like, gosh, I don't know enough about this, I need to know something else. What did we mention that you're not accustomed to? In fact, let me get a show of hands. How many of you are using social media at this point? Great. How many are using Twitter? How many Facebook? Good. How many on LinkedIn? I urge you to do that. Remember, you're a business person. Get yourself a nice entry on LinkedIn. Always have a picture. Never leave that blank, and get a good picture. Pay a photographer a little bit to do it. Don't cut your face out of the picture from your wedding reception. It's not so good. You know, with your wife's hand right across your back, that's not so good. No amputated limbs or anything like that. Seriously, your picture makes a big difference, and you want to pay a little bit and get somebody to take a nice one for you. Who's on Instagram? Yeah, good. Who's on Google+? Ah, great, me too. We are the strange 3 who are on Google+, and we don't know why, but we keep doing it, right? Yeah. It's a very mysterious platform, but I still believe in it, so I keep putting things out there. Actually, I think it does help Google find you, and that's extremely important. You want Google to know you, and they appreciate it if you're on there. So Google Plus is not a bad idea, especially with an automatic dashboard that will put it in there for you. In social media, as I was saying, that you don't want to concentrate on it to the detriment of your writing, but you do need to actually make sure that you're putting some time and some energy into it, because it is a marvelous form of outreach we've never had before this period in history. This is really a very recent development, and it's come along at a good time. Orna, what is your main interest? Well, what are you seeing most that authors need to think about in terms of marketing that they don't do? What's the biggest mistake they're making?
They listen to what some other author says that they should be doing, and then they run off and do it. And then next week or next month, they hear something else that some author or marketeer says they should be doing, and they run off and do that. Yeah. And they're running around the place. And what they really need to do is stop, sit where they are, and work out what is their value, what are they bringing, and who are they bringing it to. And that last one is really important. If I ask an author, who do you write for? So many of them will say, everybody, you know, and that is simply not right. So if you think you write for everybody, I'm here to tell you you're wrong. You don't.
Every time.
You write for a specific group of people. And the way the publishing is set up now, and the way in which you reach readers now, the more niche you are, the better. The more you can define your readers in terms of, you know, the more you can narrow it down, the better. So that's the thing to do. Spend ages, really a very long time. Don't spend any money on any marketing service until you know how to market, until you know how to reach a reader. When you know how to reach 10 readers, then you're in a position to reach 100, then you're in a position to reach 1,000, and so on. And then you're ready to hire someone who can maybe get you reaching in the hundreds of thousands. But until you know how it's done, until you know who your reader is, until you know what they appreciate, what they want from you, and it's different. It's very different for different kinds of books. You really need to think all of that through, and that's the single thing I see authors not spending enough time on.
Yeah. That's such good advice. You really need to do your homework absolutely from the ground up, and particularly remembering that as much as it hurts us to admit it, we're not writing for ourselves. We are at that quiet moment when you first start, but if you want an audience, you must keep them in your minds. And you must, again, as I was saying, be outward-facing, reader-facing in everything you're doing. Andy, a question I've got for you has to do with the professionalism that I'm so impressed with Ingram Spark, always encouraging, always promoting. where is the point of professionalism that authors tend to fall down on the most? What do they not do most frequently that they should be doing that a trade house would do automatically?
I think one of the things that gives it away, I mean, when every month we do these Ingram Days in the UK where we have self-publishers, we have traditional publishers, and now we have booksellers who come and we do a presentation. But one of the things we do as part of the day, and one of the reasons why it's popular, is we go downstairs where the books are manufactured and we can see them come off the line. Now, one of the things that gives it away, and from an independently published, is they do not spend the time, energy, or investment in the covers. And some covers, you can tell straight away that it's not been done through a traditional publishing house. That's not to say traditional publishers get it right all the time. But when you see, I remember there was a book coming off the print line, and it was some karate, kung fu, sci-fi book, and it had every single kind of graphic you can think of just thrown on the cover, and you could tell a mile away that this has been self-published. So I think that's one of the giveaways.
This is one of my favorite topics. How many of you have produced your own cover? And it's okay, you're among friends, you can admit it. Nobody? This is wonderful. We love you guys. This is great. A lot of authors are trying to do their own. You can see them. How many of you have seen a cover that you could tell, boy, that's self-published? Yeah? It's kind of embarrassing, isn't it? It happens a lot, and it's a place where too many people think, oh, I'm artistic, I can make this happen. Not so much. And it's also a place where people think nobody cares about the cover. Yes, they do. That is actually, I think, one of the key elements of selling your book, how to grab them with a cover. Orna?
Yes, and even those who wouldn't dream of doing their own cover can hire the local designer to do a cover. I would urge you to hire people who are experienced at book design. Book cover design is a very specific art, and trade published books are works of art very often. I mean, more and more, I think covers that are coming out of trade publishing are absolutely gorgeous. Now, just mind-blowingly gorgeous, and that is, you are competing against trade published books as well as each other, and that's really important to remember. And occasionally we do see a mind-blowing self-published cover, but not often enough. So make sure anyway that your designer is experienced in layering and all the things that go to make a good cover.
One of the biggest advantages is a little bit sad in a way for the industry of designers, but the trade publishers right now are tending to work out-house a lot. They are letting go their in-house designers and then using some of them, the same people, as freelance designers. The good news is that it means you can often hire the same designers who are working at some of the biggest houses in the world. Because in order to make ends meet, they're taking many levels of jobs, many types of jobs, and they're available to work on your material. There also are some fairly good aggregate sites that have a group of designs ready for you that you can begin with. But the trick of those is to try to test, look around, use your right click on Google, which will let you see this image somewhere else online, because you might find that cover's been used 5 times already, right? You want to make sure you've got something quite unique, quite your own, and preferably done for you, something custom made. Kinga, what do you find in covers? Are you guys offering pre-made covers yourselves, or do you send people to designers?
No, designers, no.
Yeah.
So that is what
Are you on? There you go.
that is what we are suggesting as well, to have designers. But on the other hand, there are some cool tools what you actually can experiment with as a starting point. If you don't have the money or you don't find a designer, just to make sure that it's going. So yeah, I come from entrepreneurial background, so I'm always trying to push things as fast as possible to just to have feedback, and then we can pivot. So that's what we actually are suggesting. So if you cannot find a designer, then just try with Canva. They have good sample files, basically what you can use totally free, and then you can DIY your cover for the very first part, and then you can actually change it later on. So that's the beauty in ebooks, that you actually can change it anytime, and everything will be automatically changed for your readers as well, which is really important. And one comment for Orna's question when it was about how to make more marketing, it's again from entrepreneurial mindset. You have to talk to the customers. So don't talk to the authors almost or always. You have to actually talk to the customers, talk to the readers. If you find one who actually likes your book, talk to them why and what they are actually doing in their spare time, what kind of blogs they are reading, what kind of media they are actually watching, whatever you actually can just ask them, because then you are collecting a lot of relevant data, a lot of relevant information for you about your market, because that is the person who actually already read your book and liked it. So I think it's really important.
And also when thinking about covers, part of the same process is looking at what is successful in your genre at the moment. So you might like a cover, you might have an idea in your mind of what you would like to put out there. And I have a personal story about that. I was trade published and I hated the cover that they had put on my book, and I had this image in my mind of what I wanted to put on it. And when self-publishing came along, I had the opportunity to do that and put it out there. But actually, within 18 months, I was changing it because I could see it didn't actually work. And then I got a cover that did work in the genre that I did like. So it's important, as Kinga said, the most fantastic thing about all of this is that nothing is forever. You try, you put it out there. It's very creative, it's very experimental. Nothing is forever, and you're constantly in a feedback loop and trying to improve.
Even about the covers, you actually can ask your readers. So if you have multiple versions of the cover, you can just ask them on social media, which one do you like the most? And then that's all. So simple. Nothing like, as I mentioned before, not brain science or whatever. It's like just ask them and then they will answer. So because they want to actually engage with you, and if they think that they are appreciated and they have actually a word in your work, then they will probably like you even better. So I think that's a good way to go.
Right. Even in that regard, though, and I like that idea, if you're crowdsourcing opinions on them, try to get them all to be professionally designed, however. Designers know things, for example, like what happens to a cover when it goes way down to a thumbnail and sits on the Amazon site or another store site. Then it still has to pop. It's got to grab their attention. It's got to get the title out there. And there are a lot of tricky things that designers know how to do so that it can shrink to a tiny size and still be effective. These are things the rest of us just don't do very well. And that's why you don't want to try this at home. You really need somebody extremely good when it comes to that. Andy, how important is formatting, the interior of a book? I find is something that authors don't even think about until they get into it and go, oh my God, this is actually important stuff.
Yeah, that's a great question. So yeah, formatting, proofreading, typesetting, and the covers, as we mentioned, it's all the things that differentiate between a self-published book and a professionally self-published book. And I mean, one of the things that we always encourage, and I'm always saying this about Ally, is join a professional association, learn from people who've gone through the journey, and things that you just wouldn't think about will become evident to you, you know. It's great, we mentioned about the covers and about getting social media feedback. On the Ally forum, which I'm a member of, you see the authors, you know, will give you 3 or 4 different options, and I'm even just, you know, browsing on Facebook, I want to respond because you want to give your feedback and getting that, looking at the whole package and almost thinking at the end of writing the book is not the end of the journey, but just the very beginning. I think that's where a lot of the indies that don't go to do the investment and join the associations where they fall down.
No, it's such a good point. I mean, again, as like a business person, as we're saying today, the idea and even the joy of the writing is quite a different set of skills and quite a different phase of the process. And what Andy's saying is absolutely true. Once you've got the book written, even once you've gotten it all fixed and it's ready, you've given it several edits, you're still at the beginning, because you're then starting on the journey of how to get that thing out into the world. And as we're saying, it's okay to make some mistakes. But joining an organization like the Alliance is smart because a lot of people have made those mistakes ahead, and they can help you. Orna, can you talk a little about the campaigns that the Alliance is doing?
Yes, we run a number of different campaigns. So as well as being, our mission is excellence and ethics in self-publishing. So as well as giving a lot of education and advice and helping people to do it well and to professional standard and beyond, actually, we talk about excellence, which goes beyond just professional, but actually really being as good as you possibly can be and recognizing that that's always a moving sort of target. As well as that, we are an advocate for self-publishing, which makes us lots of friends and lots of, well, I won't say foes, but people who really there is a lot of work still to do in order to make self-publishing understood within the books ecosystem and within readers. A lot of us are very familiar with what's going on now, but people in the wider world don't know at all. I described myself as an indie author the other day, and somebody said to me, "What's an indie author?" And to me, that's an incredible question that people don't, but he had absolutely no idea what I meant by that. And I spoke about self-publishing, and he said, "What's self-publishing?" And you know, when you're in this world, you're so embedded in it that you forget. So our campaigns are twofold. They are, on the one hand, relating to ethics. So we have an ethical services wing, which we operate through our watchdog desk. That essentially rates the services that you would be hiring. So that varies from tiny services like the local freelance designer that we were talking about a minute ago, all the way up to Amazon KDP and beyond. And both Ingram Spark and Publish Drive, we are delighted to have as partner members because they offer a really good service to authors. And that is another function that when we really like a service, they become partner members of the Alliance, and our authors know that if they go there, they're going to get a really good, they're going to be looked after essentially and get the service that they've paid for. So unfortunately, there are lots and lots of services where that is not true still. In the old days, it was easier. Either you had a publisher and they invested in your book, or you hired a vanity publisher and they didn't invest in your book. They took your money and didn't produce a very good book for you. And now it's much more difficult to know because some services are excellent. Some expensive services are excellent. So we put a lot of time into analysing who's good, who's bad, and we run a ratings desk. So that's kind of on the ethics side. We also run an ethical author campaign, because there's some unethical behaviour among authors too, where people giving each other 1-star reviews to drag their competitors' ratings down. We had one author who lived in the south of England, who travelled up to, found out the address of a person who had left a negative review, travelled up to the north of Scotland, found them in the supermarket doing their shopping and hit them over the head with a bottle of wine. That's how serious some authors take a bad review. So we, around that time, with Porter's help actually, we launched an ethical author campaign, and we found that a lot of our authors are very pleased to be able to put a badge on their website that says, "I'm an ethical author and I sign up to," I mean, not hitting people over the head with bottles of wine isn't in it, but to some principles that actually say, I know what I do. Because as authors, when we've published, we can be very passionate about our work, and we can do things that we don't necessarily know are not ethical. So there's that. And then we are also always looking to the future. So technology made self-publishing happen. Kinga was talking about artificial intelligence and, all the various ways in which we can use machines to help us. We believe there's another disruption coming down the line called blockchain. I know Kinga's really interested in that as well. We're on a joint, Ally has a committee, and Kinga's part of that committee, and we're putting together a white paper to see if we can, for the very first time in human history, have an author-led payment trail. So how authors get paid at the moment is the money goes to a service or a publisher, And then the last person who gets paid in the chain is the author. And we believe it should be the other way around. The money should come in through the author, and then we pay the services what they're due. So we're looking at blockchain and how that might happen. That's one of our kind of futuristic campaigns. We also run an open up to indie authors. What I was talking about at the beginning there, the people who are more resistant. A lot of the prizes, for example, are not open to self-publishing writers. We believe they should be. Libraries, events, literary festivals. We want to see authors there, self-published authors there, talking about their books, not talking about self-publishing, but talking about being equals in that. And we also, our one final one is Ask Ally, where we commit to being able to answer any self-publishing question you might have.
Kinga, you had a thought?
Yeah, on the blockchain part, I'm not sure whether you saw it, but cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, actually it has a peak right now. It is $6,000 right now. It hit this. So it's growing. So
I'm really interested because Bitcoin, which is one of the cryptocurrencies, would allow what I'm talking about, the digital wallet that would allow an author to get paid. I was getting a taxi home the other night, and in my local minicab office, up on the wall, Bitcoin exchange. So you can put in your money, get your Bitcoin out. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, just look up blockchain for books. It's coming, you know, and maybe you could skip this whole bit we've just had and go straight into, I mean, I think some of the territories where Kinga is putting material into, in the way that they skipped a lot of the ebook reader thing and went straight onto reading on phones. I think they're going to go straight into digital wallets and skip a lot of the other stuff.
yeah, especially when we were in San Francisco during the Google Accelerator program, we met so many fintech companies in blockchain who actually are using blockchain technologies in Southeast Asia or in Latin America. So those emerging markets are already pretty much ahead in terms of fintech technologies. So I think, yeah, in the future that will be definitely a thing.
I love the comments we were just hearing because it reminded me of one point I wanted to make too about internationalism and the languages your books appear in. One of the things we're learning as we fortunately become a more multicultural world, where we're not looking at such homogenous societies one after the next, is that there can be many saleable languages in your own country, in your own culture. We used to think, oh, if I translate my book into Spanish, I have to send my book to Spain or I have to send it to Latin America. That's the only place reading. Not at all. Those of us who live in the United States have a gigantic reading Spanish population. And the smartest of our authors, particularly the self-publishers, of course, are starting to realize, wait a minute, I'm not going to do French or German first. I'm going to do Spanish because it's such a huge language right in the States. So you don't have to get out of the country. Now, English, of course, is very powerful because of the Commonwealth, the legacy of the history, putting it in so many parts of the world. And it basically is becoming the lingua franca. It's the one that everyone eventually will speak to some degree. So it's a great language to make sure you either start in or get into relatively quickly. But don't overlook some of the smaller or more diverse languages that are within your own culture, because you may actually be losing sales right where you live. No?
Yeah, but when you actually think about translation, there are some services which offer you royalty shared or revenue share services for translations as well. Personally, I wouldn't try that because if cover is actually a very important issue, then translation is even bigger.
Very big. Yes. You want it to be good.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
please hire someone very much an expert on this field. Take a look at their portfolio, what they already did. Try to evaluate them before working with them and paying a lot of money to them, because obviously translations are not that cheap. But I think that's pretty much important to actually look at some other opportunities besides English. That's totally true.
Yeah, we find we're urging authors to look into this. A great thing to do too is make sure that you have a native speaker as a friend who can test about 10 pages or a full chapter of the translation that's coming out. And they can tell you almost immediately, oh, this doesn't read right, or this is beautiful, this is great. It's always good because if you don't speak that language, you may not be sure that it's right when you look at it. Is there any translation operation going on yet with Ingram, Andy? Have you guys started making any availabilities? I know that often you'll offer or direct people to some good services that they can get. What about translation? Is that something you're going on yet?
So I think there's something that Ingram are looking into. I'm not aware of anything as of today. But yeah, absolutely. We find actually a lot of the most successful self-publishers in Ingram Spark, the ones, maybe the 1%, but they're driving the double digit in terms of revenue,
right,
are the ones that are not only thinking about, you know, the ebook, the audio book, the print book, but also thinking about languages in the way that you just described.
Exactly.
You know, and they're in multiple formats in multiple languages.
Yeah.
And obviously we highly recommend Ally, who recommend services that can provide that. But
right.
Yeah, it's something that I think won't be too far from happening on the Spark site.
That's terrific. One of the things the Alliance has worked on is trying to identify members in each country so that if I decide to get my book translated into French, there will be members of the association in France, in Cameroon, in many of the places of the Francophone world ready to help me sell the book, ready to recommend it to their friends, read it, buy it, move it around. The community available through something like the Alliance is gigantic. When you think of close to 20,000 people being contacted by this organization, you can find somebody almost anywhere to help you move your book along in a market you've never been to. And that's very important to do too. Right?
Yes, because the challenge is marketing.
Exactly.
You know, so it's challenging enough to get a good translation, but then you need somebody who's going to help you to be known in some way and maybe do your social media for you in that language, so it can help to work with a translator who's willing to add that in as their service, and a revenue split can work well there because they are invested in trying to help you to sell your book. So there's a lot to think about with translation. I would recommend that nobody thinks about translation until they've published and sold. Published meaning sold, not published meaning produced. At least 3 books in English. So then at that point, start to think about translation and other rights.
Consideration. Are there questions that we're not answering now that are in your mind? Because we're close to the end. Got one?
Thank you so much for this wonderful insights. My question, I think I asked this to Andrew, but for platforms like Publish Drive, do we also for Publish Drive, I mean, do we need to upload a fully completed book, or can we start by sharing, say, 1 short story per time? Or if I want to share just a 10 poems piece, can I do it through Publish Drive? That's my first question. I have a few.
Yes, you can do it. So what we usually actually suggest to have a book which is around 30 pages long at least, but especially that we allow free books to be published with our platform. It's totally fine actually if you are uploading shorter versions of your book. But I would actually suggest you to include some kind of marketing materials then, not just the poems themselves, but something what actually tells a story about you. If you already thought about that, I think that's something good and something which actually gives an insight to the reader themselves as well.
Okay, thank you.
If I could, I think there's real value in putting out some short work and some long work. And, you know, putting your short work at a very low price point or free, and using it as a way to draw in people and putting a lot of your marketing effort behind actually the one that is free or won't make you a whole lot of money at the start, with the view that, you know, you're building readership. So I would say, you know, from a situation where the advice before would have been to do full-length books, I would say we're moving to a situation where do both, have a mix.
Yeah, and what we can see that, for instance, free books are amazing in emerging markets. So if it is the future, then you actually have to try it out already. To price for free in different markets, and then you actually build on that later on with the next books which are coming out, and they actually can be priced for $3 or whatever you actually choose.
Okay, so I'm Turkish. I'm from Istanbul. I have 3 short story collections so far published through traditional ways. but digitization is very important, and I've tried some of the steps that you have mentioned, and I think that was an amazing meeting, that so many very valuable things were shared. I hope we all had our takeaways. I still didn't decide if I am to be independent author or will go with the traditional way, but we should all think about all these new avenues like Publish Drive or Ingram Spark. Can we try your ways with languages not very widely known, like Turkish?
Yes, we already have a lot of Turkish publishers, and we are actually selling them quite well. So if you want to actually just try out, it's already free. We have even Chinese content as well, because we have Chinese partners too. So yeah, we have more than 40 languages in our platform. So.
Thank you so much.
And to return, just finally, before finishing with you, just to return to that point you made about, you haven't decided whether you're going to do trade publishing or do both. It isn't either or. Do both. If you can, there is no reason why you can't do both. Just make sure that your contract doesn't tie you into being exclusive.
Right.
Yeah, and I actually talked to some authors who were publishing before with the big 5 publishers, and they are right now self-published, and they said they wanted to be more free, and they wanted to actually write in more creative ways as well, in much more categories, and that's why they decided to go independent. I actually like the indie publisher or the authorpreneur word much better than self-published, to be honest, but as far as I could see, that was a good choice for them, because they actually could be more creative. You don't have to forget that it's your life and it's your choice, so you have to enjoy the ride. You have to enjoy what you are actually doing. And if you feel that it's already something what you are not enjoying, to delivering all the deadlines and then delivering all the content what you don't want to write anymore because you have other ideas coming in, then you just try out something else.
This is such a good point. We've discovered, originally I think we all thought that you were either going to be a self-publisher or you were going to go with a trade publisher and go through the usual route of trying to find a contract. Now what we see is a lot of trade published authors going towards self-publishing. Perhaps they get their rights back to a group of books they've had in the past. They then need to put these out themselves rather than try to find another publisher. And a lot of the smart ones are getting very good at this. They're learning to reconstitute and give new life to books they had written, published, and then came back to them in their rights. And we're working in a lot of contracts with the trade publishers to get those rights back earlier. Because for a long time, the contracts were not very good to authors, and in many ways they still aren't. But one of the worst things was that they would grab your rights and hold on to them for your lifetime plus 70 years, whether anything was selling or not. Or if it said as long as some book has been sold somewhere in the world within a year. So there's this joke called the Mongolian ebook. They'd say, one ebook copy just sold in Mongolia, we've got it for another year. Now those contracts are being rewritten. The publishers are actually being pretty good about this, thanks to a lot of pressure from the Authors Guild and the Society of Authors. And they're getting better for authors so that you can, in some cases, get a contract that says, in 5 years, we'll talk again. Do we like what we're doing as a publisher and an author, or would we like to go our ways? That way you can get your material back faster, take it out yourself as a self-publisher, and give it new life that way. So try not to think too rigidly about being trade published or self-published. Look at each project and decide what would work best for this project. And that's your guide as to where you want to be in terms of a path to publication. Yeah?
Yes, for us, independent author is not synonymous with self-publishing. So there are lots of people who self-publish a book who do not have an independent mindset. And, you can trade publish and have a very independent mindset. So for us, indie means that you are the creative director of your book and of your career. I can't stress that enough. So you will do whatever is best for your book at a particular stage in time. And that may be a trade publisher, but let's face it, for the vast majority of authors, you ain't going to have that choice. I meet loads of writers who say, I haven't decided which pathway I'm taking. And I say, well, you have a contract? And they say, oh no, they don't have a trade publishing contract. Until you have an offer, you don't have a choice to make. really. You can just wait and decide what you're going to do. And if you really, really want a trade publisher, you're just going to have to wait and pitch and go and pitch again and pitch again, and you may get tired of that. Or you can self-publish, put it out and see how you get on and build on that. They are your choices when you're starting off. Then as you build your career, the better you are at self-publishing, sooner or later somebody's going to knock on your door with an offer. And at that point, you need to hold on to your sense of yourself as an independent author who's doing the best thing for their career. Not, you are allowed to jump up and down and say, way, somebody wants my book. But don't sell all your rights away forever. Really look carefully at what's being offered. We do contract advice as well. In Ally, we can, say to you that reversion clause that Porter's talking about, that's all important now that self-publishing exists. So yeah, you've got to, even if you don't quite feel it, you've got to fake it, that you're in charge until you actually are.
But I'd just say on that theme, many of our that top 1% I was referring to in Ingram Spark, they're then headhunted by the publishers. But by that time, they've got to a stage where the publisher needs them a lot more than they need the publisher. So many of them are deciding not to because actually they can make more money by staying independent.
We see them about 6 months ahead. So if they had had an offer 6 months before, they'd have taken it, but now they're in the place where they no longer need it.
Yeah, and what we can see as a trend as well, that there are some authorpreneurs who actually are publishing so well that they decide to be a small publisher themselves as well. So they actually are acquiring other people, like their friends or their wife or even their children in some cases as well, to publish their books, and they are doing great. So I really like that kind of approach, that they are trying to engage other people to publish more. And this is a trend, what we can see, that many authors are becoming this kind of new wave of publishers, which is pretty cool, I think.
Exactly. This has been such a good session, and we're almost at the end. There are a couple of resources I want to mention as we come out. You remember earlier in the afternoon I mentioned Reedsy as a source for author services in terms of editors, designers, people who are very professional. They are vetted and they can help you with your work. A representative of Reedsy has just very conveniently landed in our audience. This is Ricardo, and he'll be glad to talk to you and let you know how you can find Reedsy if you're looking for professional help with your book. And I would like to mention the newsletter for authors that I make with my colleague Jane Friedman in the United States. We do international coverage as well as American coverage for authors, news of the industry. What we're trying to do is help you know what you as an author need to know about the industry, not what the industry needs to know about the industry, just what affects the author. We come out every 2 weeks. It lands in your inbox. You read it, and then you go back to work and you don't think about it again for the next 2 weeks. The reason is we discovered that authors were spending a lot of time trying to find the information they needed about the industry, and the web is full of confusing blogs, material that's not so good. This way you get expert advice, again, only every 2 weeks, and you can keep your focus on your creative work and yet be an informed author, which we think is important. So if you'd like a card, come up and help yourself. I think there's some material from Ally here that Orna has brought us. Andy, did you have some more books that are available?
Yeah, there's some books available on the Ingram Spark platform, so I'll bring them out as we conclude, and feel free to take one if it's of interest. So.
Terrific. So come up and get anything you need. Thank you all for coming. Thank you guys for being such wonderful speakers.
Thank you for
this has been a great afternoon. And we wish you well with your projects. Do say hi to us. Thank you for coming and have a good afternoon.
You've been listening to another great session brought to you by the Indie Author Fringe and the Alliance of Independent Authors, Ally. You can find out more about both by visiting Ally's Self-Publishing Advice Centre, www.selfpublishingadvice.org. Now, go write and publish.